Dr. James Miller says that it was all propaganda, all a propaganda op. The lab leak isn't the real COVID story. The real COVID story is there was no pandemic. Everything in the news was wrong. It was all a lie, he says. And you know what? He's right. He's absolutely right. Everyone was poisoned with nanotech that they spray on us every day, put in the food, water, and air, and then they made people sick by activating it with 5G and 6G now and up to 8G, I'm told. So, anyway, this was, as far as COVID itself goes, being the virus and, it was a version of SARS-CoV-2, all that was nonsense. The lab leak from Wuhan and the gain of function stuff, all nonsense. And so I guess I might as well just let the doctor say it himself. So here we go. This is the surgeon who says, in fact, he was at the hospital. He worked at the hospital that supposedly got the first COVID patient in the US. He says it was all a propaganda op and it was all a lie and everything in the news is wrong. So there was no pandemic at all. So let's just listen to Dr. James Miller and let him tell the tale. Here we go.
First of all, everything in the news was wrong. It was all a lie. So our hospital had the first diagnosed COVID case in America. It was a guy who came back from China, allegedly. It was all a propaganda op.
Given that you think that was a propaganda op, what it makes me think of is the fact that University of Washington is right there. Bill Gates is a big funder of that school. He's a big funder of the health metrics and evaluation group that did all those COVID death predictions for the United States. I mean, do you think that that was all part of that propaganda scheme right there locally?
You know, I could theorize, I can speak to what I saw. It was the mood was so bad, but it was just ridiculous. So I don't want to hypothesize, kind of off air. I might have my opinions, but what
Yeah.
I can testify to was after the first diagnosed COVID case that made all the news, the chief medical officer of the medical group called me down and we were at odds. We were already at odds about corruption. So I'm in this like basically contentious relationship with this guy and he calls me down and says, "Hey, did you hear about this COVID guy?" And I'm like, "Not really. Whatever. It's not my world. I'm a trauma surgeon." Like my thought of viruses and vaccines was like well under 1% of my brain space ever. I knew enough to get A's on my medical school test, but like not something I was naturally interested in.
And by this COVID guy, he was referring to Fauci?
No, the patient who had the first diagnosed COVID
Oh, the first
case,
diagnosed
who came
COVID
from
patient.
Wuhan, China, and showed up allegedly on our hospital doors. But here's the part that's weird. So the reason the hospital has such a cumbersome name of Providence Regional Medical Center Everett is because it's actually two campuses, and the second campus is just a birthing center and a rehab unit. So allegedly, they housed that guy there.
Whoa, wait, wait, wait. They housed the COVID guy who came from Wuhan in the birthing center?
Well, at least at that campus. Now, the CMO told me, "Oh, that's where we have our special negative pressure rooms," which was a bald-faced lie because every ICU room in our hospital again, it's a beautiful hospital. It's the most beautiful hospital I've seen in my life. It was like gorgeous. But every ICU bed was a negative pressure room. And so that's just silly. Additionally, as a trauma surgeon, because you deal with all the bad cases, particularly in the middle of the night, everyone tells you everything. I spoke to zero nurses, zero infectious disease doctors that ever took care of that patient. So maybe allegedly one of the infectious disease doctors who I never met or never talked to about it kept his mouth shut, treated this guy, but I never heard about it. So none of the pulmonologists, the lung specialists knew about him. No one talked. So the whole thing was silly, but why would you admit a guy to a hospital campus that has no ICU when you're worried about a deadly pandemic? Like, it's just illogical. So just from that, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then
So you've got this first COVID case, and he's supposedly in a negative air pressure room, which is ridiculous because every ICU has negative air pressure. So it wasn't really a special place for this person who came from Wuhan. And so
right,
what?
with no pulmonologist talked about seeing him, and I knew all the pulmonologists well.
Really? So they sent no pulmonologist to talk to a guy with COVID and probably had COVID pneumonia. And back then they were diagnosing it based on that chest x-ray that showed this quote unquote glass lung syndrome, right?
Right.
So it would
And the
have been
truth,
a pulmonary
yeah,
pulmonologist who would have gone there.
yeah. And again, people talk. So I'll just absolutely hold out. There's a theoretical chance this actually happened. It just never happened with any other infectious disease. Like every tuberculosis patient came to the ICU because there were negative pressure rooms. Every other infectious disease we're worried about came to the ICU. So that it's just not logical. And again, as a trauma surgeon, people tell you things.
Yeah.
They just do. And it just, you become a confessor to a lot of people and they tell you stuff.
Hold on. I've got a weird question. Do you think that patient actually existed, or do they want everybody to think there was a COVID patient there from Wuhan?
Okay, you're asking me to conjecture about things that
I
might
know.
strain my credibility. I don't know. I just know I knew everybody and no one met the guy.
How strange is that? So there's a doctor, a trauma surgeon, who works at that hospital where the first COVID patient allegedly showed up, and he knows all the pulmonologists, and yet not one of them treated this guy. He's, the chances of him not hearing about the treatment of that patient are slim to none. Just like he said, there's a small, minute chance that maybe there's a doctor he didn't hear about that kept his mouth shut that treated this guy, but unlikely. So there it is. All propaganda, all a lie. So, like he says, first of all, everything in the news was wrong. It was all a lie. And then if you want to watch the entire interview, it's down here. I'll put the link on the website as always. And that'll be it for now. God bless. Take care. Johnny Storm. Don't Speak News.